Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
The only reason people are surprised by Harrison Butker's speech is because they don't understand how misogyny works.
There's a whole other layer to this Harrison Butker thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about yet. Now, I agree with Cecilia Regina that this should not be a surprise, his comments, because it's not just incels that spew this crap. It is privileged, educated people that spew this crap. But there's an origin to this, and the origin is in Harrison's religion. Once I heard that this guy was Catholic and that he was speaking at Benedictine College, it all made sense. I was raised Catholic, and up until the mid or late 2000s, my mother was a once-a-week churchgoer. She went every Sunday her entire life since she was like a small child. Never missed a Sunday. Around the time of the Bush administration, so early mid-2000s, my mother noticed a change in the Catholic Church. There were a bunch of young priests that were coming in that were speaking plainly, boldly political talking points. It was like they pulled them straight from the GOP's Fox News talking points. They were talking about abortion and how any Catholics who vote Democratic are not good Catholics, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when it kind of started. In the last 20 years or so, there have been a lot of young priests coming out of seminary that are very conservative and are what I call throwback Catholics. The ones who disagree with the changes in Vatican II, the ones who despise the so-called cafeteria Catholics, the ones that, they say, oh yeah, I believe in church teachings, but if someone else wants to do that, fine. Like there are a lot of Catholics that are pro-life personally, but they're not pro-life politically. They're like, I'm Catholic, but not everybody is, and I'm not going to tell no one else what to do, right? Because they're, human beings with thoughts and empathy. But this new brand of Catholics coming up are starting to sound a lot like evangelicals. And I noticed that 15, 20 years ago. When I initially heard them speak, I'm like, no, those aren't Catholics. Those are like evangelical Protestant people. No. They are almost indistinguishable now in terms of how they sound. But I'm not the only one who's noticed this trend. The AP noticed it too. This is an article from May 1st, 2024. 15 days ago. A step back in time, America's Catholic Church sees an immense shift towards the old ways. It's been a slow burn, but really this shift has been coming for 20 years. Madison, Wisconsin. It was the music that changed first, or maybe it's just that when people at the Pale Brick Catholic Church in the quiet Wisconsin neighborhood finally began to realize what was happening. The choir director, a fixture at St. Maria Goretti for nearly 40 years, was suddenly gone. Contemporary hymns were replaced by music rooted in medieval Europe. So much was changing. Sermons were focusing more on sin and confession. Priests were rarely seen without cassocks. Altar girls for a time were banned. It was like a step back in time, said one former parishioner, still so dazed by the tumultuous changes that began in 2021 with a new pastor, that he only spoke on condition of anonymity. And it's not just St. Maria Goretti. Across the nation, the U.S. Catholic Church is undergoing an immense shift. Generations of Catholics who embraced the modernizing tide sparked in the 1960s by Vatican II are increasingly giving way to religious conservatives who believe the church has been twisted by change, with the promise of eternal salvation replaced by guitar masses, parish food pantries, and casual indifference to church doctrine. The shift, molded by plummeting church attendance, increasingly traditional priests, and a growing number of young Catholics searching for more orthodoxy, has reshaped parishes across the country. And this is exactly the trend my mother noticed when she was attending church in the early 2000s, which is why, post-pandemic, my mother doesn't attend church anymore. I mean, she'll say it's COVID or whatever, but I honestly think that this is a big reason why she never went back after COVID. Because she used to complain to the head parish priest, who was like an older generation Vatican II guy, Father Jim. I loved him. He was sweet. And Father Jim would pull those guys aside and say, hey, you can't talk politics in the church because we're at risk for losing our 501c3 status. There are rules to this. And now that the U.S. Supreme Court includes 6 Catholics. Out of the 9 justices, 6 of them are Catholic, and they're like real Catholic, like conservative Catholic, right? So it's this ideology, this shift in like this evangelical Catholicism, this old school medieval world Catholicism, that is the ideology that dominates our current Supreme Court. Now let's talk specifically about Benedictine College, which this AP article specifically references, which is telling. Benedictine College is a private school in Atchison, Kansas. Now back to this AP article. You can find this new vision of Catholic America at Latin Masses in Milwaukee, but also you can find it at a little Kansas college built high on a bluff above the Missouri River. At first glance, nothing seems unusual about Benedictine College. Students worry about unfinished essays, the complexities of dating, etc. But look deeper. Because at Benedictine, Catholic teaching on contraception can slip in to lessons on Plato, and no one is surprised if you volunteer for 3 a.m. prayers. Pornography, premarital sex, and sunbathing in swimsuits are forbidden. If these rules seem like precepts of a bygone age, they are. That hasn't stopped students from flocking to Benedictine and other conservative Catholic colleges. And like other political conservatives, this guy thinks that the cure to the modern day cultural problems of, like male loneliness and anxiety and depression is to get married and start a family. How do I know that he believes getting married and starting a family is the solution? Because he said that in a commencement address he gave at his alma mater last year at Georgia Tech. And here's what he said. In May 2023, this is from the National Catholic Register article, he drew attention with his commencement speech at his alma mater, Georgia Tech, during which he advised graduates to avoid being, quote, alone and devoid of purpose, end quote, and to combat loneliness, anxiety, and depression with what he called, quote, one controversial antidote that I believe will have a lasting impact for generations to come. Get married and start a family. I think the reason why this particular commencement speech at Benedictine this year hit was because he specifically went after women and women's education and our vocation about, being mothers or whatever. But he was spewing a lot of the same crap last year at his commencement address. This is a group of Catholics who has criticized the Pope for saying stuff like, be nice to gay people. Like, in no way has Pope Francis reversed the church doctrine, either about abortion, gay marriage, or anything like that. He's just said, don't shun them from the church. If they still want to come to church, let them come to church, give them the sacrament. He said, be nice to the gays, and these people lost their freaking minds. Harrison Butker is 28 years old. He was born in 1995. I graduated high school in 1995. This guy's a kid. But if you understand the arc of the shift to orthodoxy of the modern Catholic Church, you understand this guy. And when you think about it that way, it's not surprising at all. Because while overall church attendance is down, the people that are left in the church are these super conservative types. So they're going to be the ones that are going to have the most influence over how the mass is done, what the church looks like, what the activities are, what sort of curriculum that students have in these small Catholic colleges. Because the only people that send their kids to those colleges are going to be conservative Orthodox Catholics. These young Catholics that were born in the 90s and 2000s are a whole other breed. Think less Vatican II, more Spanish Inquisition.